Hi guys and welcome to another FPL video, and today guys I'm going to be doing my first ever FPL points predictor for game week 2 of the FPL 21/22 season. I'm very excited to get into this video. Yesterday I did my first ever proper FPL video on the channel, kind of giving my performance review from game week 1, in which I got quite nicely above the average of 95 points. If you want to go and see that detailed review of game week 1, that video is already up on the channel, and my kind of plans initially for game week 2. And I thought maybe a good other thing to kind of put onto this channel, obviously FIFA still being a massive part of the channel, but other things to kind of include on the channel is like, to have a few side videos on FPL, and one of those being a point predictor, looking to ahead at the upcoming weekend's games. And of course we are still a few days away from game week 2 taking place, but I thought it was already good to kind of get into a position where we have a look at some of the best performance from game week 1, and then seeing how some of those players might fancy themselves in certain in certain fixtures for game week 2, and how they're likely to get themselves some good points. So for the point predictor, I'm going to be choosing 6 players, so 2 defenders, 2 midfielders, and 2 attackers as to who I think are good budget cards. Some of them are budget cards, some of them are slightly expensive cards, as to who to get basically point returns. So obviously for defenders, maybe coming over attacking returns and also clean sheets. For midfielders and for attackers, coming with assists and goals as well. And as you can see on the right hand side, we already have some of the top transferred in and transferred out players. So of course it wouldn't necessarily be too good to get the likes of Cavani or Kane into your team for this weekend, because they will not play. Even if Kane just transfers to Manchester City, he will not play this weekend. I can't see him playing until after the international break, in my opinion. But then obviously you can see some of the top transferred in players: Paul Pogba, Bruno Fernandez. Will they make this video as the players who I think are going to get themselves good attacking returns and a reasonable, a good viable option in terms of their prices to go for? We'll have a look in a second. But anyway, let's start off with the defenders. So the 2 defenders have gone for. The first one is going to be Tanganga from Liverpool. Of course, he was a fantastic performer in that opening game of the season, and he's a fantastic budget option, still only 4 million in price. And he has been one of the kind of top transferred in players going towards this game week. But I think he's a very, very good player to be able to go for various reasons. We saw in that first game that he wasn't just good in the defense, which, was obviously going to be a very important part to him. And obviously he came with the clean sheet, which is obviously very good. But he actually looked good on the attack as well. He's on corners, for example. He knows actually how to put a ball into the box. I mean, I'm a Liverpool fan. I watch Liverpool week in, week out. And so many times when Liverpool players take corners, they can't beat the first man. 9 times out of 10 when Tanganga was taking corners, he was beating the first man. One of his corners as well led to the goal eventually by Mohamed Salah. So he knows how to put a ball into his box. So attacking returns is something that could still come from Tanganga. Burnley weren't good in the opening game of the season. Lost 2-1 at home to Brighton. Brighton are a team that don't often score as well. So for them to concede 2 goals in the opening game of the season against Brighton does not bode well for them at all. Tanganga is such a good budget option, and he will play. Robertson will not be fit for the start of this game. Tanganga for 4 million is an absolute steal. If he had played bad in that first game and maybe Liverpool would have drew or got beat, then obviously I wouldn't be sitting here putting them as a potential option, because maybe Milner might have gone and filled in at left back for a potential game. But because he played so well in that position, he will start on the early game on Saturday, and I think he's just such a good budget option to be able to go for. Not just for his potential clean sheet returns, but also a potential chance of being able to get himself a return from an attacking perspective as well. The other player that I've gone for is Tanganga from Spurs. He got the man of the match performance in that game yesterday against Manchester City. He was absolutely superb. He, coming up against Jack Grealish, he made Jack Grealish very quiet for large parts of the game, and I still have no doubt that Jack Grealish will go on to be a fantastic player for Manchester City, but Tanganga very much won that battle on the whole yesterday, and to get man of the match in a massive marquee game like that is very, very impressive. Now they're coming up against Wolves, and Wolves will be playing their first home game of the season, but they got beat 1-0 by Leicester. They didn't look fantastic in that opening game, whilst I think Spurs looked very, very good. Nuno Espirito Santos has already got a nice good plan working with that Spurs team. Son looks fantastic through the middle. They are a team that we've seen in the past. They actually kind of play better without Harry Kane. So, and Tanganga came into that match, and it's just such a good option to be able to go for 4.5 million. I think he was really, really impressive. Certainly Spurs' main standout player, and I think could be, obviously he's not nailed on for a clean sheet, but I think he's a very, very good option. I think once you look at kind of some of the defenders that are available, I would argue that Tanganga and Tanganga are better options than like Luke Shaw, for example, to be able to go for, because their ownership isn't as ridiculously high as someone like a Luke Shaw, and they're actually cheaper than Luke Shaw sure as well. So that's why I've gone with those two. Now for the midfield, I've gone with two very high-priced players. The first one has to be Bruno Fernandez. He was so good in that opening game against Leeds United, and I fancy a potential similar outcome in that game against Southampton. Now Paul Pogba has actually been the most transferred player going into this game week, but actually with the players like Rashford to come back, with Sancho who might even start the next game, because obviously Man United played so much for him, Man United are going to obviously have to start, and they won't spend the 60 or 70 million on him and not start him. I think there's a chance that Sancho could start in that next game. Therefore, if he does start, Pogba will not play in quite as an advanced position as what we saw in that game against Leeds. We obviously know that Bruno Fernandez will always play in a very advanced position. So yes, a lot of people are transferring Pogba, but if you haven't got Fernandez in your team, you're thinking, who do I go for, Pogba or Fernandez? You go with Bruno Fernandez, because Pogba will not always play as far up the field as what he did in that game against Leeds United. Bruno Fernandez has got the track record that's going to be consistent throughout the season of being able to get goals and assists. He's on the penalties as well, which you obviously know about, and he was so good in that game. Okay, he didn't get any assists, but he got a hat-trick, which is absolutely fantastic. They're coming up against Southampton team that looks an absolute mess. They just lost their Vestergaard, their best defender, to Leicester City, so their defence is in an absolute state right now. Everton, comfortably went and scored 3 goals against them in the opening game of the season, and with United coming off the back of scoring 5 goals against Leeds, I just don't see a world in which they don't score United, and I don't see a world in which Fernandez isn't part of that United team scoring. I think he has to be. I think he is their marquee player. A lot of the football kind of flows through him, and I think he's a high price tag of 12 million, but he's an absolute must to have in your team, because if you don't have him, you're going to struggle with your points. And it's basically the exact same for Mohamed Salah as the other midfielder I have in this team. Such a key player to have for this game week. He's absolutely brilliant. Mohamed Salah, fantastic. 2 assists in the opening game against Norwich. A superb goal as well to make it a nice 3-0 win for Liverpool. He was fantastic. I had both of these players in my team. And because looking at their fixtures for the next game was all, Burnley getting beat at home to Brighton. Not a good start at all. Southampton getting comfortably beaten by Everton. They are the two, okay, for very expensive choices, but if you're sitting there and you want to play FPL to get the most points possible, at minimum, you've got to have one of these players in your team. Ideally, both of them, to be quite honest, for the rest of the season, unless they get injured or something like that. I think you're stupid if you don't have both of them. I think if you want to sit there and finish high in FPL this season, these two have got to be in your team without a doubt. And I really just can't see. I mean, Liverpool in half 12 games kind of have a bit of a history sometimes for struggling, but Salah looked he looked sharp in that first game. He really did, and I can't see him struggling against Burnley too much. I think he'd be very much on form. The Liverpool team in general looked very good going into that first game against Norwich, keeping a comfortable clean sheet, looking dangerous on the attack. Okay, fair enough, for the first 5 or 10 minutes Norwich looked the better side, but Liverpool came into it very much from there and looked very comfortable from there on. Burnley, okay, took the lead early on against Brighton, but then for the rest of the game Brighton looked pretty comfortable and came from behind away to go and beat Burnley, which was very much a surprise. But yes, Salah's absolutely class, isn't he? He's got to go in there. And then with the 2 attacking players, we're going to first of all go with Danny Ings. Got that penalty goal very late on in that, what was starting to be a bit of a comeback for Aston Villa against Watford. Ultimately still got beat. They lost 3-2. But, as the game went on, further in that second half, Villa did start to get better. At first half, they weren't good at all, and Ings wasn't getting a sniff at all. But the second half, I think they still conceded 1 goal in the second half, but as the second half went on, they got better and better. And I'm looking at a Newcastle team that, fair enough, Newcastle scored 2 goals, but obviously you don't have to worry about Danny Ings conceding goals. That doesn't matter. All Ings needs to do is either put the ball into the back of the net or get assists. And I can see that happening because Newcastle looked a mess defensive-wise. It looked all over the place, and it was so easy for the wide players at Villa to be able to, create space for themselves. And when you're thinking about the likes of, Leon Bailey and stuff like that, who looked absolutely superb when he came on the pitch and got an assist, he's going to absolutely love coming up against that, that Newcastle defence and being able to, supply balls towards Danny Ings, who we know very much is such a clinical striker. And obviously, if Villa are to get penalties, we know that he's going to be on them. And, Newcastle themselves, they looked very clumsy. They made a stupid tackle for Antonio to get the penalty as well in that game. So I think Ings at 8 million is a very good option to be able to go for, as is Ivan Toney from Brentford. Now ultimately Brentford, for Ivan Toney at Brentford, he didn't score on the opening game of the season. Brentford themselves though did win 2-0. Toney had a few chances himself, and the thing that really caught my eye about him was he absolutely bullied Ben White from Arsenal. Ben White, £50 million signing. Ivan Toney absolutely dominated and winning those aerial balls for so much of the game. And I fancy him to do something similar as well against Crystal Palace. Palace looked poor. They did. I think Vieira will be the first manager to get sacked. I really, really do. I think they're going to struggle a lot after losing Roy Hodgson at the end of last season. They didn't look good against Chelsea. And okay, fair enough. Obviously Palace playing Chelsea away on paper is a lot harder than them playing a newly promoted club at home. But Brentford, they look good. In Benro or whatever his name is, the £5.5 million midfielder looks a very good option. But I like Ivan Toney. He's a very, very good target man striker. Reminds me a little bit that he could have a bit of a really good start to the season like Timo Pukki did a couple of seasons ago for Norwich City.